welcome to Back to Basics. I am Gerardo Estava, and today we're going to talk about the basics of handling public and private files with your cloud application. Your cloud application is likely using a combination of both. So let's say a public website, and those static files to serve your website. Where do you store your HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and other media files so that your users can access your website? A common anti-pattern I see is to bundle those files together with your backend application code. For example, if you already had application code running on EC2, I can see why installing a web server on the instances and bundling your static website with the rest of your app might be tempting. It sounds simple, and sure, it can work. But coupling software components is rarely a good idea. For instance, having multiple developers working on the same code base can bring challenges. Merging everyone's changes can become a stressful experience. But also think about software release. Imagine having to release software and going through the whole process every time you need to make a change on something trivial from the website like an image. It sounds like a waste of time. In modern software architectures, you want your components to be loosely coupled. This will make applications not only faster to scale, but easier to manage and troubleshoot. The best place to store and serve static websites on AWS is Amazon's S3, among other things because it's designed for 4 nines of availability and 11 nines of durability. And for static website files, S3 offers built-for-purpose website hosting functionality, removing the need to use web servers completely. You must enable website hosting on the S3 bucket where your static website files are. And to deliver your website securely over HTTPS and at the same time speed up website delivery to your users, you can use a CloudFront distribution in front of it, which then becomes the entry point to your website. Your website is then automatically updated by simply uploading new files, deleting files, or replacing individual files on that S3 bucket. So your static website files are best on S3. But what about user files, such as documents or user photos? Can we store those on the EC2 instances file systems? Well, I would not recommend that. On one side, your files would have less availability and durability than on S3, but on the other, it would also be costlier from the storage, network, and EC2 processing capacity as opposed to S3. And for auto-scaling apps, it will be hard to keep a copy of all the files in sync on each instance, or unnecessarily complex to introduce a network file share. It is hard to beat S3 at its game. On S3, you don't get any of these issues. S3 is a great place to store private files, such as user files. By default, all S3 buckets and objects are private. So how do we let our application access these private objects on S3? Well, 2 things need to happen. First, the application needs to have permission to access the bucket. You do this by having the EC2 instances assume an IAM role with an IAM policy that allows accessing the S3 bucket. This is similar if your application is on ECS, on EKS, Fargate, or Lambda. All these can assume IAM roles. Second, your bucket needs to allow to be accessed. This is done by configuring a bucket policy, which is simply a resource-based IAM policy with permissions to access that bucket. Now you have 2 S3 buckets, one with your public website files and one that is private that only your application can access. What if you want to share a private file with a single user? You certainly don't want to make a private file public because that would risk unintended access by every other user as well. Instead, you can use a pre-signed URL to grant temporary access to a specific S3 object. A pre-signed URL can be constructed using the AWS SDK or the AWS CLI, and it uses the creator's own security credentials to sign the URL to add a layer of security to it. Then you give the URL to your user, and the user will be able to access the object for a limited time that you configured. When this time lapses, the pre-signed URL will no longer access the object. So there you have it. Amazon S3 is a great addition to manage files with your cloud application. Use it to decouple the application, to serve public websites, to keep private files private, and to share files as needed securely. Keep on building, and I'll see you next time.